Have you ever felt stuck or struggled mentally, emotionally, and just feel like you're saying the same patterns in relationships, the same people, or things just ain't shifting? Have you ever felt like you've been a burden, or you've been shamed, or you've been in relationships that have been dishonoring, where you've had to play small, or you've had to shrink yourself, or you've had to limit yourself? And have you ever felt like you're just in a place where all you want is just more peace in life and an ability to be able to relax and be able to cultivate a deeper state of presence and be able to feel at home? Well, if the answer is yes to any of those questions, this episode is for you. As welcome to Soul Coffee. You're tuning into the only podcast that caters to the exhausted provider who wants to feel more presence, more energy, and be able to get back to experiencing this beautiful life. I'm your host, Dr. Jamal, Tucson chiropractor. As I've been so excited to be able to dive into 2024 with the interviews, as we have the first interview for today. And I'm just really excited for the foundation, as what this individual brings to the table is a very depthful, grounded way of being able to bridge very etheric spiritual principles and practices, but bring them into a very grounded, applicable, tangible, digestible way to be able to change your life. And I imagine you're going to get value right away, as she's also been a return guest here now on Soul Coffee, which is exciting, as her episode was The Cost of Not Doing the Work. I believe it was episode 56 last time we talked in 2022. It feels like a lifetime has occurred since then. So without further ado, excited to jump right in with Annelise Cherie.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in. If you're here for the first time with us, welcome. If you're returning, thanks for being here.
Oh, geez, shout out to y'all. Shout out to y'all. Several hundred of y'all, by the way. Several hundred of y'all. Anyways, Annelise and I were talking yesterday as like a pre-chat for this episode, because we could just dive into whatever it may be. And one quote that she said that really just slapped right away was, "Peacefulness is a reward from accepting the dichotomy of life." Care to elaborate?
Yeah, I mean, it's such an important thing to look at. Dichotomy, just to be very clear, is understanding that there's going to be constant polarity in everything that you do. There's positives and negatives in every situation, every belief system, every experience that you go through. So really being able to bring perspective or choice with an accepting dichotomy really is an incredible access point to your healing.
I appreciate, because I've heard dichotomy in the sense of leadership with Jocko Willink and different aspects to things. As I think of integrity, I think of health, I think of these different infinite games. I'll stick with health and energy being an infinite game of there's so much that you can improve forever, like forever. And I think the dichotomy and understanding that concept creates more of a level playing field, because then you can understand, like you said yesterday as well too, the ups serve the downs and the downs serve the ups.
Yeah. Well, the big thing that's standing out for me is to accept and understand that there is dichotomy, that there is polarity in life, meaning that no matter who you are, what you're doing, nobody's free of the human experience. You are going to ebb and flow through the natural rhythms and cycles. There's going to be beautiful moments of positivity in your life and negative moments. And the reason why that matters is because it gives you more, almost like more of a Rolodex of just looking at, realizing that when there's dichotomy and you acknowledge both, you have more choice. If you go into the void or the underbelly, sort of a depressive space, if you will, or an anxious space, you begin to realize that you have control, or I guess is the right word, or you have availability to perceive the situation as you wish. So embracing this dichotomy really is just saying, I understand, like the goal is not to live positive all the time. That's not fair to do to yourself. That's not fair to hold that goal in yourself. The goal is to maintain balance. The goal is to live in a state of peace, of acceptance, that life is a constant journey. It's a constant roller coaster, ebb and flow of positives and negatives. My objective is to not, reach for one. My objective is to learn how to accept the full circle of life. And by doing that, you get the ability to be in more control. You get the ability to then, in that point, choose your perspective. You said something just now, essentially the paraphrasing, the light serves the darkness serves the light. They can't exist without each other. The concept of how would I conceptualize and understand what heat is if I never knew what cold was? It's not possible. So you start to realize like, for me to really have the experience of joy, pain must exist. That's dichotomy. So you start to realize they serve each other, and it's just very powerful in that way. Yeah.
Yes. As I love the conversation of light can't exist without the dark, dark can't exist without the light. From a chiropractic philosophical lens, we see light just as health, just as heat, as the entity. Somewhere in the reductionistic, materialistic world, medical science labeled disease as the entity, and the absence of disease is instead health. And I think that's what distorted our perception in the United States, perhaps the world, when it comes to health. And why is that important? Well, the thing that is a part of the underbelly, it's all energy. Because energy, it holds a physical sensation. If you're anxious, there's probably an extension of fear, or probably extension of the sympathetic nervous system, or dorsal vagal system starting to go into shutdown. But both of these are in a lower, quote unquote, state, or maybe even in an elevated state, more so sympathetically, to be able to prompt you and give you the gift of the energy so that you can then utilize that to shift your life. Now, where we get stuck as human beings, I've just been on a Dr. Joe Dispenza kick, is we get addicted to these emotions because we can feel. Even if it's feeling pain, even if it's feeling hatred, suffering, depression, anxiety, being abused by a loved one, being in relationships that don't honor us, which is why I really wanted to drive this home, because there's been a lot of conversations lately, and I think exchanges amongst people, where we were talking yesterday, and it's like, other people's baggage meets your baggage, and then what happens when that shit happens?
A collision.
Because it's definitely a freaking collision. And I've been interested to see, and utilizing the prefrontal cortex, part of our neocortex, part of what makes us human, we have the ability to apply metacognition. And if we have the ability to apply metacognition, then we can observe ourselves, observing ourselves, meaning we are not our emotions. And if we are not our emotions, and we're not our bodies even, which can get addicted to these emotions non-consciously as a means of energetic efficiency, but we're not consciously applying that, well, that's where I think where we start to get into these stuck patterns of the anxiety, the depression, the burnout. Or for the listeners that are tuning in right now, what is your compensatory pattern emotionally? When it comes to confrontation, do you lean into it? Do you lean away from it? Do you come with your sword and spear at hand? Do you just shrink yourself? So take this time to be able to sensitize yourself and take inventory on what are your predominant patterns. And what are the stimuli that bring that up? Is it a certain kind of energy, a certain kind of person, a certain kind of job, a certain kind of environment? Is it a sensation in your body? Is it some aspect of the day? When we can begin to bring awareness, I think, and do this work, which is the point of it, to be able to leverage our neocortex in the first place, well, that's how we can powerfully then start to use our mind to shift our mind, which Caroline Leaf teaches on, Joe Dispenza teaches on, and Annelise has reflected in her previous episode. And as I think it's a more inspiring way to wield life.
What's coming to mind as you're speaking on that, you said we can get addicted to our patterns, right? So addiction patterns, the word that came to me is adaptability. Adaptabilities, talk about dichotomy. What is the dichotomy of adaptability? We can adapt to situations in a really beautiful, positive way that works for us, and we can adapt to traumas and unhealthy situations.
Maladaptive. That's the dichotomy, which is neuroplasticity.
Yes.
You're either adapting for constructive, beautiful, delicious things, or your body's going to make you feel more symptoms in the form of chronic disease from being in a state of chronic dis-ease or stress.
Correct. Yeah. So it's just really important to acknowledge that is very real within our human construct.
Yeah. Because, Joe Dispenza, if a thought which a human can utilize to preemptively feel and start to stress about over something that may not even happen, and our thoughts can make us sick, or we can get stuck in the past from a previous thought experience, whatever it may be, and that can make us sick. Well, then the game is, well, how can we use our thoughts to make us healthy, make us strong, make us adaptable, make us be able to enjoy this life more versus being a slave to our thoughts. And I think that's where, I'd love to hear a little bit more into. We talked yesterday on some people refute or refuse to see their darkness or to see certain aspects of things, and they deny the whole truth, and thus they're denying nature, which is truth, and we're extensions of truth.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, going back to this idea of natural law, we are nature, just like you said. And if we're in conflict, I always find with my clients when they come in, I'm always looking to see, are you in conflict with natural law?
Oof.
Are you in conflict with truth?
Oof.
Because if you are, that's where we need to start.
Oof.
Oftentimes control, fear, these are actually a deeper cause of being in conflict with natural law. Understanding that there's positives and negatives to life, that there's ups and downs, that there are beginnings and endings. And, a lot of that stuff can result in quite a lot of interesting perception, a lot of interesting perspectives.
Because we were talking about yesterday, the mind can be how we think, feel, choose, perceive, but then we also layered in behave, and then that builds our habits.
Yes.
So it's just so fascinating when people can build a habit of refuting or running away from these different aspects of things. I just love that. Are you in conflict with natural law? And I just hear there can be an unnatural environment, or you're responding in an unnatural way.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I mean, the thing is where focus goes, energy flows. So whatever your mind, whatever you're focusing on, whatever you have experienced is sort of what's attuning your body to your life, and what your internal environment is becomes external environment. So this is why your perception is so important, because what you focus on, what you expose yourself to, what you experience, what you engage in, it influences all of your belief systems, which will influence your behaviors. And that's going to be the result of your life. That's how that is. So, the importance, just really what I help clients with all the time is just the importance of, I use the phrase perspective expansion, realizing if we get into a very rigid state of mind and we become overly attached, addicted, or patterned into a certain way of being,
good options.
You've got to be willing to change your mind. You've got to be willing to let go of the rigidity, the absolutism, and say, is there another way? Is there a better way? Is this working for me? Am I happy with how my life is? Am I at peace with what I'm experiencing? If not, I need to start really looking at, what do I believe? What is my emotional relationship to my thoughts? What are my emotional relationships to my experiences in life? And being willing to really change the perspective on those things. I know for me personally, and the whole reason I even got into this path, some deep traumas that occurred for me as a child, the way that I overcame wasn't, forgetting about it or removing it from my neurology. It's not possible. But where the healing began was to almost become the writer of my story and actively be a participant in rewriting the emotional relevance of what it means to me. No longer why did this happen to me, but how did this happen for me? And realizing my greatest traumas, my darkest thoughts have an invitation to get me back to the light. They have an invitation to really allow myself to, look at, why am I here? Why did I choose this? What is this showing me? Is this a key to somewhere I'm not looking? And this is where I go back to saying, be willing to change your mind. Because that's what I'm saying is hard.
It can be hard.
Yeah.
And I just think of people who are like, well, why would I do that? Still challenging it, or still not, maybe it goes over their head, or they're just, why?
Well, I don't even, with people, I'm not so much sure that it's why, as much as how comes up a lot, or not even knowing. Like oftentimes people aren't even aware.
I think that's the main. I think that's
Yeah.
probably the most common. Like people just may not know. And you said yesterday again, she drops fire, especially when she's in channel. But it's so good because why do people suffer when we deny these parts of reality and parts of our stories, parts of our expressions? And I think I just want to hit on story real quick because your nervous system, your spinal cord holds your story of your life.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the lines when we went to the DSM book for diagnosing people I got DDD, I got migraines, I got headaches, they assigned themselves to these different diagnoses, which I think explain or are just a reflection of the current status of their bodies and their pattern neurologically. But we got to just be able to appreciate the story.
Yeah.
I think people don't appreciate their stories. They don't know their stories. They don't remember their stories. They don't study their stories. They disassociate from their stories. When the stories have such a juice and importance and sustenance that holds, like you said, keys. And I think it's also interesting, like inside of our bodies, it's dark.
Yeah.
Dark as fuck. It's supposed to be like, and that it's the unknown, and we get to be able to influence that. But why do people suffer when they deny? You said because we don't know that is there and it has a grip on us. We're not going to understand when it's making choices for us actually. So, and another extension of that is what you're not aware of, you can become a slave to.
Yes.
Especially when it comes to like addictive behaviors, etc.
Yeah. Basically, what you're getting at is this idea of integration of shadow. I see a lot of people in personal development, self-help, therapy, spirituality, religion, whatever you want to call it, just any form of expansion, there often can be a rejection of the shadow. And all that means is the unconscious parts of ourselves, the parts of us that we don't understand, the parts of us that we don't even see. And, I always use the analogy with clients, like the shadow is, imagine you're a 2-year-old kid and you're hiding underneath your blankets and there's a monster in the closet, and the monster being representative of the shadow. And at that point, like, how you work with it is are you just going to stay underneath your sheets for the rest of your life, refusing to address what on some level you are aware of is there? Or B, do you go to the door, open it, and start to familiarize with those parts that are within you? And it's at that point that you find more freedom, more free will, because exactly like you said, it doesn't control you anymore. I mean, the fear of it being there is limiting the child metaphorically, keeping them underneath the sheet, preventing them from living their life. But when we face those parts of ourselves, we're not limited in our expression. It's facing it. And the thing is the more you familiarize with it, the less control and scary it becomes. You start to understand all the little details and nuances of what it is. And, this is where I help my clients realize, like, you can't kill the shadow, you have to integrate the shadow. And remember, like, the amazing thing about integrating the shadow is if you walk into a room of darkness, if you flick a light on, the light's always going to overtake the darkness.
It's the entity.
Yes.
It's just what it is. It's the absence of it, which can allow things to manifest.
Awareness itself is what changes and integrates a shadow. Yeah.
I'll challenge that a little bit, as sometimes with increased awareness and with no resources and lack of will, then that can actually spiral people into the other direction. But I think where we get a advantage that we've kind of cultivated, it is our community, it's the mentors we seek, it's these natural ancient ways of being able to heal and be able to shift our lives very, very potently. One thing that I'm still stuck on that you said is when you're able to open up the closet door per se and take a good look at a boogeyman and say, well, what
are you?
Or it's like, ah! Like whatever it is when you pull open that door, because it's probably fucking scary.
Totally.
Like that's why it's in the shadow.
Exactly.
That's why you're not even aware, because you could be non-consciously trying to protect yourself from it. And we were talking about this yesterday as well too, about courage. Les Brown. It takes courage to change your life. And in times of big change and leaps internally, or literally moving across the nation or whatever to start anew, as me and Lou shared our stories multiple times, the ability to cultivate and find more free will and the ability to summon courage in the face of fear. And I think
Yep.
that's something that a lot of people may not understand still. It's like courage isn't just like there's no fear and you do something. No, courage is like, yo, you're shitting your pants and you are horrified and you're sweating and you are scared because you don't know what's on the other side of that, and yet you still give yourself permission to show up because you deserve it, because what's on the other side is a more free you, that you'll now have more access to more cohesive, more potent, more powerful energy that has a treasure box of God knows what that's on the other side of freedom in relationship, in partnership romantically, in job opportunities, and healing, and in health, and in life. That's why when Annelise is saying, perspective expansion is everything. Well, when you can expand your perception, you increase your bandwidth, and you have more bandwidth, you now have a wider lane or a wider space so that you can navigate life. And that's hot because, well, now you can show up more regulated because you gave yourself permission to stretch, but you're still coming home. You're not going to stay out there forever. It's taking one step, whether it be 10% outside your comfort zone or you launched all the way into disassociated. Well, you got to come back home and you got to get in your body.
Yeah, it makes me think of this summer I spent a month in Peru, and I myself was coming up against some fear that I didn't realize was within me. And I remember one of my teachers looking at me and just saying, I was like, what do I do with this fear that I didn't know was there? It's like I knew what to do with it, but you know how it is. And, they just looked at me and they said, you call upon courage. And
Oh.
I realized, I was like, oh, right, that's a pattern disrupt. And this is where you realize when I start to move into a space of fear, it is my discipline to instead shift the focus, the perspective into courage. So it's like when I feel those negative emotions coming in, that is when you need to be intentional about, I need to go focus on things that make me feel courageous. I need to go really meditate on a different thought form, a different way of thinking and being. And so, that's literally just called a pattern disrupt. It's acknowledging, oh man, I know what this is. I call it out. I don't want to experience this. What's the opposite? What's the dichotomy? Where's the polarity of this? Right? So, yeah.
I love the ability to call on courage, because what that is, you're bringing in the energy of what's needed to create a shift in your life. And with chiropractic, a lot of time we match tone with our people. Sometimes, we're in a predominant relaxed state ourselves, but sometimes we may need to come through more intensely. Other times, it might be just a connection with finger, bringing awareness here into my fingertip, and then letting them unwind themselves. So matching the tone that's necessary to change your life, because what a pattern disrupt for me, it's a mental adjustment.
100%. That is a pattern disrupt. It's a perspective adjustment.
Yeah. Right.
And the thing is there are many ways that you can.
And there's so many. And that's the beautiful thing.
Yeah.
But what ones work for you?
There it is. I think for me, just sharing a little bit about what I do in this context, I first realized that, your thoughts essentially are energy. And I first really learned that physically in 2016 in Peru, where I began to realize oh my God, whatever heavy experiences or traumas or whatever, there's an energy to it. There's a density to it. There's a frequency within the body. And it's almost that's what I'm connecting to. That's what I'm part of. That's what I am connected into and experiencing based off the thought process. And as I started to learn a bit more about energy work, which is another great way to influence mind and influence the nervous system, I started realizing that just by placing my hands on different energy points in the body, that I was receiving almost the person's thoughts. I was receiving the person's memories. I was receiving their experiences. And that's where I started to understand, my God, literally thoughts and energy are the exact same thing. I'm able to access this information because this is their energetic imprint. And when you can start to understand, and which is why I put such an emphasis on, to change isn't just about, therapizing or talking it out, although that is important, time and place for that. You also have to learn how to connect and understand energy on some basic level, understand quantum physics on some basic level. And that just creates such an incredible, opening and understanding, like, whoa, what I focus on, I will energetically experience, which will result in my life. What I believe, I will see evidence of in the world around me. And all of that can change with one minor adjustment in what I believe, one minor adjustment in what I give life to. And that's where everything changes. That, to me, is the definition of empowerment. How am I empowering or powering myself up? By what I choose to give life to, what I choose to focus on. Yeah.
I appreciate the energetic imprint and you tuning, because what you're tuning into someone's field. And if this is still a new language for people, like entering someone's field, like we're all there's the quantum field, which we're all entangled. But what I'm focusing on is, we were also having a great conversation with our friend Ariana, like in the car. It's like, what came first, the emotion or the energy or the thought? And with my understanding with Caroline Leaf's work, it's great to appreciate that there's thoughts that extend up as a tree and lead to conscious behaviors as branches, leaves, etc. But at the roots of things, there's informational, emotional, and physical sensation memories that are built upon hundreds of thousands of memories that make up one thought. One thought being, I am not enough.
Yep.
All men are dangerous. I'm not safe here in X kind of location. When insert sound goes off, I'm not safe. Or so that's why it's important to tend to and build awareness of these different thought gardens. Or what are you growing? You got some good trees in there? You got a fruit bush? What you got in there? Because when we can be able to start to make life a video game and understand that you get to garden these things in your brain. The brain is not stuck. It is adapting maladaptively or adapting in a more constructive way due to neuroplasticity till the day, to the minute, to the second that we die.
Yep.
So I'm not saying there's no excuses, but there's no excuses. But with that, with increased awareness comes greater responsibility, which is something Annelise said last time as well too. I mean, and Uncle Ben did too. With great power comes great responsibility.
Spider-Man.
So then the question, then becomes, what do you want to do about it? And what would you recommend people do about it if they've started on this adventure of going internally and understanding their patterns, their emotions and behaviors?
Well, I think historically over the 8 years of me working with people one-on-one, coaching them in their mindset and helping them cultivate a deeper connection, it's, first, there seems to be a process to this, where it's first like understanding the unconscious self, understanding the parts of us that we are programmed into, or, experiences that we're holding that, don't belong to us or we don't need to hold. And once we start to understand that, the second tier process is essentially, rewriting the narrative. So it's, how do you want this to work for you? How do you want this to sit in the body? How do you want to integrate these experiences or these thoughts or whatever it might be?
How do you want to change? How do you want
to change? This? Right, which leads into the sort of third stage process, which is more about like goals, intention of like, where are you headed with this information?
Now you're seeing and
Correct.
Bridging into the future. Now you're creating. Now you're in a parasympathetic space.
Exactly.
Now you're using your full brain.
Correct. Yeah. So
that's good.
Empty the cup and then, put it back together, but from you, not from other things. Like that's the beauty of it, is now you're in a space. Yeah. And that actually quickly just brings to mind this idea of, in my own personal journey, in my own healing journey, I used to be under this strange mental construct that like, I need to discover who I am and like whatever else. And I really actually began to realize as I started to heal, I need to decide who I am.
Oof.
And
cut away everything else.
Yes, this isn't about discovering myself. I mean, there's components of that, but ultimately it got to a point where it was like, no. I need to decide who I am. And that was a huge shift into my own personal development. It was just making that little adjustment. No, who am I deciding to be? Discover that. Yeah.
I just want to recap the 3-step process that Annelise just reflected. Step 1, understand the non-conscious or the unseen self. Step 2, rewrite the narrative. Step 3, create the vision. Drive it. Where do you want to go? is reflected in my coaching process. I call the alchemist's triune, because I love the idea of being able to transmute life. And if you don't know what that means, well, read The Alchemist. Got
Yes.
to Paulo Coelho. Essential.
Yes.
But it's the idea that you can, whatever life has gifted you, whatever life has given you, you can transmute it, or you can change it, you can shift it into something different, I'll just say. And with like I've studied a lot of different books, a lot of different principles, but awareness, whether it comes to regulating your nervous system, when it comes to doing deep men's work, when it comes to healing at a profound level, what we're not conscious of is running 90 to 99% of our life. So take a good look.
It's true.
Like it just makes sense. But then the second part, that's where you get active into action. So the second step is action and awareness, so that we can start to craft the vision after you've been like, okay, cool, what do I want to do about this? So that way you can now extract the energy and just be from the future version of yourself in the now. So you pull it into now, and then see and appreciate the signs, the omens, the shifts, the relationships, like what's changing. And then the third step is like the integration for me. That's actualization. So it's being able to be highly keen of your needs, your values, your agreements, your nonviolent communication, and being able, because you've been more aware of the trauma and you're now more aware of the energy, you know, you're starting to understand this mind thing, which is so beautiful.
Yep.
Nice.
100%. I mean, I think back to my own healing, and what's coming up for me as you're speaking is, you know, I grew up with an absent father, you know, big financial struggles as a child, a lot of instabilities. There was a lot of love, but a lot of instabilities. And
that's important.
yeah, but I had a massive belief deficiency. Oof. Because I just was of the mind, like, there's no way I'll ever be able to pay for college. There's no way I'll be able to do this. Like all these limiting beliefs just compiling over years and years. And, you know, and then adding in abandonment stuff and all these things, and even some deep traumas as well that happened to me as a kid. And I just was like, this is just how it is. Like for most of my life, like this is just how I'm going to be. This is how it is. Like I just got to deal with the cards that are dealt. And when I began my healing journey, like I said, I started to realize, my God, all of this is just the meaning that I apply to it. You know, what was the point of all of this? I can stay in that victim construct of like, woe is me, which absolute no judgment to that. That's a very defaulted place to get to, and completely understandable. It's a defense. It's a survival. So no judgment. I mean, I myself lived in that space for many years, but it gets to a point where, you know, for me, I was like, enough. There's too many limits on this perspective. There's too much that I am not able to access from this place. And that's where I started to really play around with this idea of like, what if I just looked at this as the greatest invitation to my life?
What brought that in for you? Like, what made you think that? That just slap you in the back of the head, or what?
Well, honestly, plant medicine.
That'll help.
Like, okay. If I made that was an entry point. I think that was like the first.
Ooh.
Yeah, that was like just like a little flick on the head, like, you know.
A little flick.
It was a massive flick. It was a punch in the face.
It was an RKO.
Yeah. But that wasn't the answer, not even close. And I really do want to press upon that. That was just a tool, just a path that ultimately got me playing around with the idea that, you know, if my mood could shift that quickly, right, after, you know, a few hours of working with plant medicine, right, if my whole perception on life and mood could shift that quickly, then could we do that all the time? And it's not that we should never be reliant on anything outside of us as the way to do that. The thing that's so great about most, you know, tools and plant medicine is essentially, it's just showing you what you're capable of. That's it. It's just giving you an opportunity to look in and be like, hey, look, you can really change your mind quickly here with just an adjustment in thought, an adjustment in perspective, allowing yourself to enter a new space. And so for me, you know, to go back to your question, that was kind of the flicker. But it really began with me getting really disciplined with that process that you just talked about.
It's a
First,
great process.
yeah, I mean, it's basically what my coaching program is.
I get
Yeah.
it. Same.
Yeah. I mean,
Cards are on the table.
that's kind of how it goes. But yeah, so essentially, like, I applied that to my life. And, before I even turned it into a coaching program, I lived it.
It's an embodied
Yeah,
experience.
100%.
One thing that I want to reflect is that, plant medicine might have been the entry point for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's all good. I think what people can do, though, is that they can invite themselves for the entry point for change.
Yes.
Like, look for your entry points to change your life.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you can start to invite that, like, you know what? Like, I do want to change my life. You're making a declaration, and now your reticular activating system is going to turn on. It's going to start to look for different things that maybe you can apply as tools, whether it be, maybe it's just journaling.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's just meditation. Maybe it's just getting clear with thoughts. Maybe it's just fucking creating some space for yourself.
Well, what's beautiful about what you just said? What made me realize? So thank you.
Tell me.
You're exactly correct, because, plant medicine became the result of looking for a solution. And so, whatever, like exactly what you were just saying to highlight that, if you feel like you're in a rut and you're hitting a wall and you're unsure how to get out, but you just simply understand that things aren't working, just set that intention. I'm ready for a change. I'm ready for whatever needs to come into this space to help me grow.
Say it to yourself.
Say it to yourself.
Straight up.
Say it out loud. Write it down.
Talk to it with some of your big homies.
Yeah, bring it in.
This is my year, bro. Maybe it sounds like that.
Yeah.
One thing that, as we start to wind this conversation down, that I really want to like make sure we touch on is energy is the basis in which makes up our thoughts. And we've talked about, what is energy, and it's an aggregation of our thoughts. And I think one thing that Annelise said that I think is very important, because it makes her very relatable, is that it is easy to not take responsibility in the justification for my own inaction, thus taking your own life away in a victim mindset. And I think also that plays into as a cycle of the healer's trap, in that people always looking for the next thing to heal, next thing to heal, next thing to heal. Well, it's like, well, if you've done so much work and you've put so much effort and there's been integration and behavioral changes, are you recognizing that? And in recognizing it's easy to just not take responsibility, and that can allow for no action. I'm like, that's
100%.
fucking that's hard. That's really, really hard.
Well, the healer's trap, I classify this as, just constantly data grabbing information, constantly searching for, insights or awareness into self, just waiting for somebody or something to deliver that one piece of information that's going to change everything. But that's a very disempowered external approach. And ultimately, at a certain point, like everything I said just now is important and part of the journey, but I see too many people get stuck there, where it's like, hey, like at a certain point, you have got to practice what you already have learned. You have got to integrate what you're aware of. You have got to apply the gifts that have been given to you. Otherwise, it just becomes this process of data collecting, and it becomes a distraction. It becomes a place where pattern. It's a new addiction. Yeah.
Because that way you can see someone, and maybe y'all have heard it. It's like, yeah, I'm about to go sit with this breathwork practitioner. It's gonna be better. I'm gonna go sit with grandmother. What kills me is when people say, I'm gonna do insert plant medicine. Like, you don't. No, you don't. No, that's not how it works. You sit with it, and I think that's a very important distinction with breathwork practices, with plant medicine, with whatever it may be. One other thing too, as well, that I think is important to reflect is your depth and level of integration creates the space for your expression and magnifies or amplifies the space for others' expression. And if you are finding yourself in relationships or in spaces where you're communicating your needs and you're efforting to create shift and change, some things might just go over people's heads, and that's okay. But it's important. It's very important for you to be able to identify that, because it's one thing to hear someone, it's another to receive them, understand them, and then engage with them in a coherent way to facilitate, amplify, or add to that energy to a new neurological pattern and way of being and behaving versus you're just hitting a wall.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also want to reflect that the belief deficiency in oneself is so important to be able to just recognize. So
Yeah.
as a lot of people, I think, have a skill or belief deficiency. Hormozy dropped that concept in too. But in terms of neglect is how do I want to word this? If it's one thing, like, to not be in an environment that's conducive per se, but like also an environment that, nothing bad may have happened or there may have not been abuse, but neglect and not like watering a flower, not watering a plant, it's still going to kill the plant.
Oh, yeah.
Even if,
Well,
I don't know the absence of because it's the absence of love, which is the entity.
yeah. Well, here's the thing. Whether seemingly positive or negative, there was actually an article in Psychology Today a couple years back, and I just died laughing at the headline where it was like, new study shows that any form of parenting will damage your child. And that comes to mind because you're going to be programmed and influenced no matter what, whether it's a positive, loving environment or a seemingly chaotic and traumatic environment. And ultimately, no matter what, it's probably a good idea to just look at self and examine, who am I? What am I? Because we're all programmed.
Such a great question.
Yeah, we're all
Such a great
programmed,
question.
and it doesn't always have to be negative programming. Just looking at self, like, do I want to hold this? Am I good with this? Is this who I want to be? That's
Am I
it.
good with this?
Yeah.
Well, I actually I pictured a cup like outside, like that's just filling with like rainwater when you were talking about your process of understanding self, narrative, vision. It's there's a concept in chiropractic philosophy where that there's these destructive forces such as sunlight being one, or like a hurricane, these natural forces, which they don't care. They don't care in regards to, there's no limit into what they can influence and touch in regards to structural matter. But what's important with that is that that's just kind of like filling the cup. So that's like the destructive aspects of things. But when you choose to now take your cup, pull it back from what has been there, empty it, be able to, I also picture like this deck of cards is the cards that you're dealt. Now you get to choose what you put into it.
Yeah.
Now you get to choose, do you want to keep it out there? Do you want to keep it in that same environment?
Correct.
And then when you can be able to fill your cup up with not even just water, but the water that you want, or the liquid that you want, the beverage that you want, maybe some soul coffee. Well, then now you get to be able to participate more. And I think one of my favorite things about the prefrontal cortex and about the brain is that it's actually supposed to be a creative center.
Correct.
Like, we're meant to like use that thing to be able to shift our expression and shift our life and connect and process these deeper concepts, and it really, really makes us human. And then a second quick story was that we just keep saying, like, do what you can with the cards that you're dealt with. Someone can have royal flush or like whatever, they can have the sexiest hand, but they may not know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Or example A, I went and played some spades with my parents over break, and it's been a while since I had played, so I just like double checked like the rules and shit. And then I was like, all right, cool. I was like, I'm gonna get 10 books. And they both straight up just laughed their asses at me. Disrespectful. And like, oh, honey, like you probably want to lower that. And I'm like, nah, I think I got 10. And the moral of that story is, like, I ended up shifting to 6 sets, but I actually ended up with 10 sets. And I think people being able to recognize and soften life, like, and how it is a game, and how we do get the shift and how we do get the change. And even if you have a hand, there might be a dope ass play that you can make right now, even if it's just one, because you just need one play, fucks the game up.
Oh, totally.
Me and Lou play Catan. Like, momentum might be going one way, rolls a few dice the other way, where this motherfucker just rolls sevens all the time. Anyways, he gets blessed by sevens. But the momentum can just shift.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. You're never stuck in life.
No.
And I think that's just one of the most empowering things when it comes to one's mind, and understanding one's mind and how they can utilize it to be able to shift their life in a dope, fun way to make life more of a video game, or in your, Lou's and Ari's case, more of a beautiful cinematic feature.
Definitely. I mean, that's it. There's actually a game that I played over Christmas called Left, Right. And essentially it's everybody has like $4 or however amount of money and a little dice, and it just tells you like how you pass the money around, and it's just constantly changing. Like there's such a ebb and flow that's just like you're up, you're down, you're up, you're down. And that's the thing. Life is like that. And that goes back to the whole idea of the integration of the shadow, accepting life and its totality, as above, so below. Because sometimes you're going to be up, sometimes you're going to be down. You can't stay attached to either of those areas. You have to learn how to be adaptable and empowered within the ebb and flow and constant shifting and changing of life. That is going to be where your peace is found, is like, oh, here we go again, and I'm good with it. Yeah.
And as you integrate it more, you actually deepen your capacity for peace, which
Yes.
it's still one of my favorite quotes. That is, I think, the ultimate measure of success, is being able to not just maintain, but more so come back to a peaceful state of mind.
Yeah. I mean, otherwise you get into that yo-yo effect of the pendulum, up and down, up and down.
That sounds chaotic.
It is.
I've been there.
Yeah, we all have. I think it's just like a rite of passage, but you know, at a certain point, I think there's a level of understanding where you realize mastery is in the balance. And the unit, going back to natural law, universe shows us that. What is the universe's main objective always from the beginning of time? To maintain balance.
The cycle of life.
Correct.
There's destructive and constructive forces that are always working, but the constructive forces are what's innately directed within us. When we can realize that's just the game.
Yeah.
That's the rules of the game.
Correct.
But we're all meant to, I love rites of passage because I think about pass and go. $200. Pow! And you'll get there.
Yeah.
When you want to get there. Like you got to at least hit it one time. But when you can hit it one time, and like it just like it tears, or it deepens, it crafts so much in the game. So that's so exciting, so good.
Yeah.
I feel complete. I think that one final concept in a concise manner is just giving oneself permission to, I don't want to say embrace imposter syndrome, but Annelise was dropping a concept, and people feeling like frauds or like a charlatan, quote unquote, from a story that she shared. But I think it's just, what I gathered from that application is just making sure you give yourself permission. If you're burnt out, anxious, depressed, and you're a healthcare professional, or you're a parent and your shit's getting pushed in, like it's all good.
Yeah. To share that story quickly before we jump off, I have a client that's a rabbi. He retired and came to start seeing me to explore different modalities. And I remember he sat down, he's like, you know, it's so rare that I've been the one as the provider who's asking for service and receiving, essentially. And he goes, and I have to say that I spent a long portion of my life feeling some components or levels of shame or guilt or like a charlatan, because I, you know, had my own struggles, my own stress, my own things that I was trying to work out in my life. And I would constantly think, like, who am I to help all these people when I struggle to help myself?
Such a good question.
Yeah. And he then looked at me and he goes, and it wasn't until Mother Teresa died, and you can actually Google this, where her personal journals were released to the public, and it was very evident that she struggled with depression, a lot of depression. And a lot of people were like, what a fraud, what a charlatan, da, da, da. And he was like, and it was in that moment that God answered my question. Because in that moment, I realized that's the miracle. Somebody who, against the current of struggle, against the current of suffering, against the current of these negative emotions, still showed up every day and chose to stand up for what they believed in, and chose to step into that light and effort towards it at every moment of every day. So if you're a provider and, you know, you do feel components of burnout, yes, you must take care of yourself, absolutely. Listen to your body's needs, but please realize, you know, who are you to help someone if you're not having to help yourself? Like, who are you to sit in front of someone who has trauma or is asking for support and you never having to have done that for yourself? It's actually quite the opposite of a charlatan. It's somebody who's been there. It's somebody who's like, I know your pain. I know you're suffering. Here's how I did it. Here's how I regulated my nervous system and got into a good space. Let's see what it looks like
for you.
Yeah. Well, it brings to mind, and I do want to mention this. man, I obviously, as I mentioned earlier, having an absent father, I've definitely struggled with like the enoughness wound, abandonment issues. And because of that, very weak boundaries and like fear of communication. And I had just tirelessly worked on overcoming all of that for most of my adult life, to the point where, much as I said earlier, it just was like, now it's time to put it into practice. Now you just have to do it. Mm-hmm. Like, whether you want to or not, you know what you need to do. You're aware of the shadow in you. You're aware of those wounds. You know when they come up. So now you just have to take the action on what you know to replace it with. And I just want to say, for those of you who are at that point, it is not a comfortable feeling. Like, when you actually pattern disrupt and start choosing a different way of approaching situations, even if you know it's a healthier, more productive way, every bit of your nervous system, like my internal representation before I started doing that was like, I'll feel so empowered and I'll feel so great when I start doing what I know I need to be doing. And it was the complete opposite. I was like, am I gonna die? Like, am I okay? Like, I feel so vulnerable. It's so scared right now. Like, and ultimately, like, you just start to realize that, yeah, like, just if you're trying to make these changes, it's going to feel different. It's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel new. And don't stop because of that. Lean into it even further.
Ooh, lean the fuck in. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that just to appreciate Annelise's final comments, I just go back to that first time being in Life U and first time running in front of my class of 200 people, just being like, attention everybody, and everyone was like, whew. I was like, ah! But the cool thing is too, is as you do this work, I find that it compounds. Mm-hmm. So we're taking cold showers every day. Dr. Ev just got here and we're about to dive in as well too. He's take cold plunge, like text each other in the morning, cold plunge, check. Going to Tucson, cold plunge, like on the weekly basis is now, because your nervous system, it receives all stimuli in a similar way. So when you can train yourself and give yourself permission to do it's a very sacred, special kind of work, y'all. And the more reps you get with it, the better and the more easy it gets. And at the same time, the bosses also increase in difficulty. But baby, that's the point. That's why life's a video game.
Amen.
Tell me and tell our listeners, how can people reach out to you and what offerings you got going right now?
So you can find me AnneliseMindset@gmail.com, also AnneliseMindset.com, and Annelise Cherie on any social platforms. And really the offering that I'm sitting in, I always, of course, offer one-on-one sessions that are alignment healings that incorporate different energy modalities to help you create a deeper sense of connection with yourself, to help regulate the nervous system. And simultaneously, I use my unique intuitive abilities to help channel insights to just help you rework your perspectives, just like we were saying, expanding those perspectives. Also, alignment coaching, which is conducted online as well. And that's a 4-week coaching program where we dive in deep to basically everything that we just talked about.
Ooh,
so, yeah.
Here's a warm up. Well, everybody, please give Annelise some love. She had the 5th highest downloaded episode of Soul Coffee of all time. I know that this one's going to permeate better. Thank you for everyone that's listening. And also, do me a favor and send me some messages, emails, whatever it may be, as I'm looking for feedback always. But I want to know, like, when do y'all listen to Soul Coffee? Like, when is that? Because I got an idea. And I think I'm going to drop episodes in the mornings. As this year's the year, I'll drop 2 episodes a week, which I'm hella excited. But I want to feed y'all and feed y'all in the right way, in the most convenient way. So I'd appreciate that. And if this episode resonated with you, hey, leave your boy a 5-star review. As I think reviews, as basic as they may seem and as little as they may seem, they're a really big deal, as I'm learning. Because there's not like I don't run ads yet. I'm going to get better at it, but all energy is appreciated, y'all, because y'all have been so good to me. So I'm really, really excited to turn up for y'all, get a store popping in the future. I didn't forget about that. It's very important. And until next time, peace.